Okay, I think we'll get going. So welcome everybody to this lunchtime webinar on code sharing and knowledge exchange for users of the Copernicus Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 data, the analysis-ready data form. So I'm just going to be the chair for today, and I will shortly be handing you over to Paula to do a proper introduction and welcome. But throughout this webinar, you're all going to be on mute. And if you do have any questions, then please type them into the questions tab as we're going along. We'll be doing questions all at the end. So feel free to type them as you're going along, and then I'll ask them on your behalf all at the end of the session. We do have a lot of speakers today, so we'll go through all the speakers before we ask the questions. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Paula, who will properly introduce this webinar today.
Okay, thank you very much, Gwawa, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us on today's webinar. Welcome. As Gwawa says, we're going to be talking about a couple of platforms that we've set up for code sharing and knowledge exchange for users of Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 analysis-ready data. Joining me on the webinar is Matthew MacArthur from Defra and Ed Williamson from CEDAR, and they'll be speaking shortly about their roles in this project. So I'm just going to turn off my webcam now and we'll go through the presentation. I'm going to start by outlining the contents of the webinar. I will introduce the background to the project, and then I'll hand over to Matthew to talk about the Defra Earth Observation Data Service. He will then hand over to Ed to talk about CEDA, that's the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis. And then I will run through the code sharing and knowledge exchange platforms that we've set up and give a brief demonstration of each of them, and then quickly go through the next steps of the project and how you can help us with those, I hope. As Gwawa said, if you have any questions for any of the three of us at any point, you can ask those via the question tab in the GoToWebinar panel, which you should see at the side of your screen. The webinar is being recorded, but Gwawa is going to read out the questions at the end so that we can answer them, but we will leave out your name and your organization's name unless you specifically want that stated because you want someone to contact you. So just let us know if that's the case. And then we will make the recording and the slides available after the webinar. Some of these slides have got information on them like links or URLs for websites, so you'll be able to come back to these. So don't worry if it goes fast and you miss it, you can come back and look at the slides for that kind of information. So the driver for this project was two new services that have been launched this year, which give us access to Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 analysis-ready data. That's data that's already had all the atmospheric and topographic corrections done, so we get it on our desktop totally ready to use. We don't have to worry about all of that pre-processing, so it saves a lot of time and money. We've got the Defra Earth Observation Data Service, which provides data for England, and then JNCC's Simple Analysis Ready Data Service, which provides data for Scotland and Northern Ireland, because that was supported by Scottish Government and Northern Ireland Environment Agency. The focus of these projects, of these services, was really to support use of the data for public sector environmental applications, but data produced by both services is made fully publicly available as open data under an open government license through the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis, CEDAR archive. So it is freely available for anyone to use, so you can use it for academic research, teaching, and even commercial purposes. So the target audience is much wider than just public sector. And both of those services let you download the data, but obviously Earth observation data is absolutely huge files. It takes a long time to download. It takes up storage space. So it's much more efficient for analytical users to access the data programmatically using an API, an application programming interface. Both Defra EO Data Service and the CEDAR archive offer APIs for data access. And when this was launched, JNCC produced a user guide, 3 example Jupyter notebooks, and we also ran a workshop and a webinar all about using the Defra EO Data Service API. That was back in February and March of this year. They were very well attended. We got good feedback, but one thing that really stood out was that we needed more examples of code. we'd provided 3 Jupyter notebooks to get people going, but we really needed more code in more languages, showing more functionality. And we basically realized the only way to provide this sustainably was to set up code sharing and knowledge exchange platforms for peer-to-peer support, rather than putting all the burden on one organization to kind of support everyone else. And we were very, very lucky this year because we got funding through the Caroline Herschel Framework Partnership Agreement for Copernicus user uptake. There's more information about that on the JNCC website. And this has enabled us to do this project, to set up code sharing and knowledge exchange platforms and develop some more example scripts. The original, as I say, the driver behind this was to support use of the APIs from the EO Data Service and CEDAR. But the project has evolved and has got a wider aim of supporting all use of Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 analysis-ready data. So the examples of code that we're sharing is not just using the API. It could be data that you download and then process locally. So it is really, this is very inclusive. It's not just about API users. We ran a survey in July 2020 to get a better understanding of user needs, so what platforms they're already using, what they wanted to get out of it, so that would inform what platforms we should set up. And then this month even, we have now set up a GitHub repository and a Slack workspace for users of Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 analysis-ready data. And this is what they're brand new, it's what we're launching on this webinar, and they're just starting to engage people in using them. So I'm now going to hand over to Matthew to talk about the Defra Earth Observation Data Service and a bit of information about that. And he will, after that, hand over to Ed to talk about the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis. I'm going to now make Matthew the presenter, so you will shortly see his screen. Okay, over to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thanks for that introduction and summary. Very informative. Thank you for all attending. I'm Matthew MacArthur. I work for Defra in the Data and Information Access Centre, and this is the Earth Observation Data Service. Hopefully you can all see this now. Let me see. So some of you may be able to, may already have seen this service, but it's my understanding that a couple of people haven't seen it. And you should be able to see it now.
Got it now, thank you.
Great, okay. So I came into this project quite late in the day. It was about February, and to me, the service was already quite a nicely polished product. It has been the product of well over a couple of years now, and a joint collaboration between numerous agencies across Defra Core and the arm's length bodies. A lot of expertise has been lended from JNCC, Environment Agency, from CEDAR Archive, from Natural England, etc. And this is kind of the result. So if you're looking at the front page of the portal now, you have 2 points of entry. You've got your Active Directory, which is for individuals that are using Defra network devices. So that's Defra, Environment Agency, RPA, Natural England, etc. Your login credentials should match your Windows details. If you're not on the Defra network, so for example, if you're a member of CFAS or JNCC, you may require a standard account creating. So to do that, if you could please email gi-office@defra.gov.uk, or there's a link at this portal. So I'm just going to demonstrate the Active Directory logon for you here. Simply just click the button. This is if you are connected via VPN, and if you're struggling, I would ask you to just check your VPN connection, because it should just go through. And now you can see I'm on the front page here, and we have our 4 main links. So in regards to the API we have a help section, and we also have a direct link to using the API. If you do want to use the API, you will need to know your authentication token. So let me just demonstrate that. So you should now be looking at an example. On the front page, you have a drop-down option to select your profile and look at your authentication token. If I just skip back a couple of pages, individuals who might not instantly hit the landing page if you receive your internet access is blocked, it might be, if you're not a member of the Defra network, that your IP address has not yet been whitelisted on the service. So if that's the case, could I encourage you to go on GI Office at defra.gov.uk. I am aware that some members of CFAS at the moment are on a band that appears to not be whitelisted. So we're working closely with change management to try and get that through as soon as possible. So onto our data catalog. If you're on the front page, you remember those 4 links, you can click the Explore Data button. This takes you to a rolling 18-month catalog of Sentinel-1 and 2 data. After 18 months, this information is backed up to the CEDAR archive and it's removed from our portal. So you can access it under the open license there. Data can be selected, it can be put together into a mosaic, it can be put in a time series, or it can even be downloaded through the portal. Let me just put that on now. Just a quick example, because we're not actually going to be doing a lot of this today. Here's an example of some Sentinel-1 data. You can click on it, you can look at it in the portal, you can download, you can look at the metadata, you can even download the metadata, and you can, when you want to download it, you can actually select an area that you would like to crop using either a polygon cutter or just a square box. You just need to put your details in here, and the link will be emailed to you, which expires in 24 hours, and that will allow you to download the data. Okay, so going back to how you use the API. On the front page, one of our 4 links, using the API, or you can go to the help section. Here, you'll find, as Paula described, a Jupyter notebook with examples provided in collaboration by JNCC and CGI that will get you started on how to get cloudless mosaics or just produce simple queries. There's also a note file on how to install Jupyter notebooks, and also a PDF on the site on what the parameters and structure of the API is. And again, you'll find a recording of the webinar that JNCC hosted back in March that was very well attended and very informative. So that's how to use the API for now. What would we like to get out of this for the service? We would like to help build up the GitHub list of Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 analysis-ready data code. You will find some of the API code on our help section, but to constantly keep this updated would take a lot of effort and would be quite inefficient. That's when the project for API upskilling came about and provided a useful alternative, creating a GitHub list where users who were not entirely confident in their code being completely polished could openly share their resources for other users. And along with that, a community on Slack that would help users engage with each other, discuss how to best and appropriately share code and fix any bugs. So we would like to encourage you to please join the service. We have actually already updated our list on this GitHub code provided. CGI and JNCC have once again worked together to provide some additional scripts that you can use for a demonstration or in your own work. And we would encourage you to, if you have anything you would like to share, please go ahead with that. So, and discussed earlier before that after 18 months, our data is backed up to the CEDAR archive and it is removed from the Earth Observation Data Service. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Ed, who's going to talk a little bit about the CEDAR archive. Over to you, Ed.
Thank you very much. So hopefully you can all see my screen now.
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Okay, that's great. So hello everyone, I'm Ed Williamson. I'm a Earth Observation Data Scientist at CEDAR. I'm in charge of archiving the Sentinel ARD data at CEDAR. So today I'm going to briefly run you through some ways of accessing the Sentinel ARD data from the CEDAR archive. So I'm going to take you briefly through a CEDAR overview of who we are. I'm going to take you through a bit of API access and then onto Jasmine and Jasmine notebooks that we provide. So who are CEDAR? So we're part of the UK Research and Innovation, UKRI. So under that umbrella, we're part of STFC, the Science and Technologies Facilities Council, and we're in a department called Workspace. But CEDAR provide the Earth Observation and Atmospheric Science data centres for NERC. The CEDAR mission is to provide data and information services for environmental science. So that places us quite well to provide the data for the Sentinel ARD project. The CEDAR team is roughly 30 staff, split between data scientists and developers. So the CEDAR archive in total is over 15 petabytes of archive data, which is roughly 292 million data files. And in total, we have roughly around 66,000 registered data users. So searching for data at CEDAR, we've implemented quite a few different methods of finding data that we archive at CEDAR. So we have the CEDAR catalog, which gives you sort of top-level metadata, a bit about what each data set holds. You can search on keywords and hope to find data sets that you're looking for. We have the data browser that provides data to be downloaded. All of the Earth observation data sets can be found under the NEODC directory. We also have this CEDAR satellite data finder, which gives you sort of a GeoSearch interface to look at certain data sets. We have Landsat, other Sentinel products, as well as the Sentinel ARD data in there. And for a more coded interface, you can use our Elasticsearch interface using the CEDAR index, and more information can be found at this help documentation here. There's quite a few different ways that you can download / access the data that we provide at CEDAR. So we have OpenDAP, which is behind the data browser that allows you to download and access it via API. We also have FTP servers and also direct access using the Jasmine compute service that we provide. So quickly, just taking you through these different ways of finding data. So in the top left-hand side, we have the catalog search that you can input any search terms and then search your data. Bottom left, we have the data browser that you can click on NEODC and it takes you through all of the data sets that we provide for Earth observation. In the top right, we have the FTP service, and at the bottom left, we have the GeoSearch CEDAR satellite data finder. So taking you on to the API data access. So the CEDAR Sentinel ARD data can be access directly using the OpenDAP server. So this can be pulled directly into software such as GIS using this BSI curl. So it's similar to accessing data via cloud computing. So the example here is the BSI curl command that you put into the when you want to input a raster dataset. You just have to fill out the rest of the directory structure and the file name, and then you can put it into directly into sort of QGIS without having to download the data. So I've personally tested this using QGIS, GDAL, and TUIView, and it seems to work really well. I'm pretty certain it should work on things like ArcGIS, but personally I don't have any experience with that. But from the documentation, I think it should work as well. So now on to how you can access the CEDAR data directly using Jasmine. So Jasmine is a super data cluster which delivers infrastructure for large-scale data analysis and is administered by CEDAR. This typically is for sort of research-based access, but more information can be found on the Jasmine webpage at the bottom and our help pages that you can work out whether you're allowed to apply for access to Jasmine. So Jasmine has a total of 44 petabytes of storage capacity. This is split up between users storage, project storage, which is under group workspaces, as well as the CEDAR archive is also stored on Jasmine. So Jasmine provides direct access to the CEDAR archive for data processing. We provide scientific analysis servers to test and run your data processing on. And then if you want to scale out, you can use our Lotus batch processing cluster, which is running almost 8,000 cores. So you can really scale up your processing using that. So recently this year, we've also added the Jasmine notebook service. So anyone with Jasmine access can use the Jasmine notebook service. Again, it has direct read access to the CEDAR archive, just like on Jasmine, and it allows you to run Python notebooks. You can bring previously written notebooks or write new ones from scratch. We do have some examples of notebooks for other data sets that we provide in this GitHub page here. I will be adding some more Sentinel ARD examples soon, and we will add them to the GitHub ARD code list that Paul is going to talk to you about next. So here are some helpful links. So there's the CEDAR and Jasmine help pages. We also run help desks, so the Jasmine and CEDAR help desk. So you email in any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them. And then we have Twitter and website for more general information. So now I'm going to pass back to Paula to talk to you a bit more about the ARD code list on GitHub.
Okay, thank you very much, Ed, and also thank you to Matthew, who spoke just before. Both really interesting presentations, and just a reminder for everyone, if you have any questions for either Matthew or Ed about everything you've just heard about, you can ask those in the questions box. I have spotted we've already had a couple of questions about accessing the EO data service and getting ARD on CEDAR, so we're coming on to those at the end, so thanks, and please do add any other questions. And also just a reminder that the slides are going to be made available at the end, because I noticed Ed had a lot of really useful links to resources and other webinars and things, so you'll be able to get these slides and come back to that. So I'm just going to carry on now. Talking about the code sharing platform that we've set up, we ran a user survey, as I said, to get information to help our decision process about this. We got 40 responses from at least 24 organisations. Not everyone listed their organisation, so we don't know how many in total. And the people who responded had a very high level of expertise and experience in Earth observation data, a slightly lower level of experience in API use, but that's good because this project is all about helping people get more skills in API use. And we asked them what repositories they're already using, and there was obviously, you know, a huge support for GitHub as being the main thing people are using at the moment. And we asked them what features were important to them in a code repo, and I've sorted them here in order of importance by what was deemed very important or essential. So the top things, as you can see, is version control, issue and bug tracking, and the ease of putting comments on your own code. They were the top 3 things. You can see from the code repositories currently used, about 30% of respondents said they didn't currently share code, and the perceived barriers, the main one was lack of time, although data protection issues was another concern, and also the need to put code through corporate QA procedures before making it public, although I think that kind of links into the lack of time issue as well. In spite of that, a very positive thing was 60% of respondents said they would be willing to share code in a repository if we set one up, especially for Sentinel-1 and 2 analysis-ready data, and a further 38% said they maybe would. So that was encouraging. We took the decision to set up a curated list on GitHub rather than setting up a new organization repository and then having to manage members of it. Obviously, we chose GitHub, as I've already shown. It's very widely used already. It provides the features that people said were important to them. It's easy to update and provide documentation for in README files. It's easy to add contributions through pull requests. And very importantly is that it's free to set up a public repository. So that was a very useful consideration. And we thought we'd set up a curated list to also avoid duplication, because a lot of organizations already have public repositories with their Earth observation analysis code in, so we could just link to where it is rather than setting up a whole new repository, you know, when having to manage members of it. I also want to say that this decision was very much inspired by the awesome Earth observation code list, which was created by Andrew Cutts at AC Geospatial. I think probably a lot of people on this webinar may be already familiar with this because it is a fantastic resource, but if you're not, do check it out. You can find it on GitHub at Awesome Earth Observation Code. It's a curated list of tools, tutorials, code, projects, links. There's things like YouTube videos, there's Twitter accounts to follow, basically everything that is about Earth observation. So if you haven't come across it, do check that out. It's got something like, I think 400 or more links on it. Obviously ours is not at that stage yet because we've just set ours up, but that gives us something to aspire to. This is the URL where you can find our ARD code list. So it's JNCC S1, S2 ARD code list. And in the project background, I just wanted to emphasize this remit before we have a look at it, that it's for code in any language for processing or analyzing Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 analysis-ready data. So I think at the moment, all the examples we've got are either Python or R, but we'd welcome any other languages, please. And yeah, just to reiterate what I said before, it's not just about API examples. We have some and we would love to have more, but it's not limited to that. So I'm going to come out of this now and we'll have a look at the list itself. Okay, the first thing I will show you is the actual contents and structure of this. It's split into 3 main sections, which have all got subsections with them. And obviously we can add more sections to this as we need them. First of all, we've got tutorials and functions. And in here, these are example scripts that have been developed, like the ones Matthew described, specifically for training and demo purposes. But we've also got a selection of other quite useful generic processes. So things like cloud masking for Sentinel-2, creating indices from bands, clipping imagery, downloading imagery, that kind of thing. So you can sort of use that as a pick and mix and take functions you need and put them into your own workflow. And then we've also got the application sections, which is split into marine and coastal and terrestrial. And in each of those, we've got a few subsections for particular types of application, which, as I say, you can add to. And so these are complete analytical workflows for specific projects. we're really looking to have more examples. So how can you contribute to this? And this is all documented here in the how to contribute section. As we've said, this is a work in progress and we've literally only just launched it. So we'd love to get loads more examples. And the way to do it is by making a pull request. We've got really nicely documented contribution guidelines, which I will show now, which talks you through step by step how to make a pull request. And also, we'll just quickly scroll through here so you can see how user-friendly this is. There's lots of little images to just talk you through how to do it. If you're not that familiar yet with GitHub, obviously it's free to set up an account, but if you're not familiar with it yet and editing Markdown in GitHub, we've got another very helpful guide on here, Maintaining, which tells you how to edit and commit files, to do this either online in the browser or do it offline using GitHub Desktop, which is very user-friendly, or Git command line if you're familiar with that. And again, we'll just quickly scroll through this. You can see this is really nicely laid out, lots of screenshots to help you get familiar with this for, if you're not an experienced user of GitHub yet. So this is telling you everything you need to know if you would like to contribute to our list through a pull request. I know some people might be a bit short of time, so if you have code in a public repo that is relevant, it's about Sentinel-1 or 2 analysis ready data, and you're a bit short of time, if you email me the link, I can add it myself. Obviously, pull request is the best way of doing it. It will get you acknowledged as a contributor, but do please contact me because we don't want to miss out on any good examples. I'll just quickly go back to list to show how we can acknowledge contributors. So anyone who contributes via a pull request will appear here. But because I've been adding things manually at the moment, we also have a list of authors. I think there's about sort of 10 to 15 so far, that if you click on this, you'll get that. I'm not doing it at the moment because of data protection and people's names, but you will get acknowledged in the authors list if you contribute code. I'm now going to show you some examples of code that we've got in the list. I'm doing this to demonstrate the kind of code, the type of thing that's available here, but also to demonstrate some points of best practice in code sharing. So I will first of all look at some examples in the tutorials and functions section. So we're going to look at EODS API and EODS API Best Pixel. These are two brand new Jupyter notebooks that have been set up as part of this Copernicus user uptake funded project, because as I said, one of the things was we wanted to set up new scripts to help people see more of the functionality of accessing data through the API. So these demonstrate use of the EO Data Service API. The first one for downloading data, Sentinel-2 data, creating mosaic from it, clipping it to an area of interest, and creating a normalized difference vegetation index from the data. And the second one, again, downloads the data, creates a best pixel composite using the pixels with the least amount of cloud from a stack of imagery from multiple dates. So yeah, just to clarify, with each link, each bit of code, you get a brief description in the list. And we've also got these tags to give you a bit more information. So it's code that's written in Python. It was done by JNCC. It's using the EO Data Service API and web processing services, and it's funded by Copernicus user uptake. So you've got a bit more information in the tags. So we keep that quite brief. But now if you follow the link, we'll get more information from the source repository itself, which I'm going to show as another nice example of best practice. In the source repo, and just something to bear in mind if you're going to share code on the list, this has got information about the context and the purpose of the code, and basically anything else that users will need to know if they want to run the code themselves. So because this is using the EO Data Service API, it tells you that it's for members of staff at Defra, the agencies and arm's length bodies. You need to know your username and authentication token, as Matthew's already explained, and you need to be on a computer in your organization's IT network, which is obviously very relevant with some of us working at, well, most of us working at home at the moment. So that's all useful stuff that users need to know. So it's acknowledging funders for the project, and other useful information like installing RSGISlib, which is the Remote Sensing and GIS library developed by Aberystwyth University, which is needed also to run these notebooks. And if we just go back up to the code, you can see that not only are the Jupyter notebooks available, we've also got a config file, so you can enter your configurations, and the environment file. So yeah, crucially, all the ancillary files are provided as well. Now we're going to look at one of these examples just to make one other point about best practice. So look at the EODS API one. And the thing I wanted to point out here is that the script is nicely commented. We've got markdown cells telling users what is the purpose of this, anything they need to know before running it, and what's happening at each point. And then comment lines in every cell telling users what is happening in a step-by-step way. Another key thing to point out here is that user names or staff names and corporate data like file paths are removed from the code. That's absolutely critical before you share it. Make sure there's no personal data or corporate data in it. Another example here is this is where you would enter your authentication token, and that has been taken out and it just says put your token here. So that's another good example of best practice when you're sharing code. So I'm going to go back to the list now and show you our second example. So that was an example from the tutorials and functions section. We'll look at one now from the terrestrial applications section, so habitat change detection. And whereas the previous example was Python, this is now all R code, which you can see from the tag. It's got R after all the examples. And this is a set of R scripts which create indices from Sentinel-1 and 2 analysis-ready data to detect change in habitats by using it in conjunction with habitat maps, and then flagging up habitat polygons if they deviate from a mean index value by more than a set threshold. So again, we've got, as I showed you before, just a brief description for each link, saying what it does. So this one analyzes normalized difference vegetation index statistics and explains how they can be used with a habitat map shapefile to identify polygons which deviate from the mean by more than set thresholds, which in this case is 1, 2, or 3 standard deviations. And we've also got these tags again. And the other thing this does is it uses functions which are provided in a package which is here in the tutorials and functions section. So it's there, habitat condition monitoring. So it links up to that as well. So we've made that available there. And then it's also explained with examples of how it can be used here in the habitat change detection. So again, I'll just show you going to the source repository to look at the README file to get more information about it. Again, it's another nice example. It acknowledges funders, explains the context and the purpose for the code, what it does, and anything else users need to know in order to run it. I mean, this one is not using the Defra EO Data Service API. It's using downloaded data that's been got through CEDAR, so anyone could run this code. You don't need APIs and authentication tokens and any of that stuff. So we'll just now look at one of the example scripts just to reiterate the good practice of commenting. So we've got here the title and date for the script, and again everything's nicely commented so users can see what is happening at every step of the way. And again, things like user names and complete details of file paths have been removed. I'm just going to go back to the list and show you one final example before we move on. This is another example from the tutorials and functions section, and it's a very exciting new development. We've now got a Python library specially developed for interacting with the EO Data Service API. And this was developed by the company that Matthew mentioned. This company used to be called Sysys, now merged with CGI, and they actually developed the EO data service. And one of their developers has now developed this Python library, which contains some extremely useful functionality. listed just a few examples, but these are things which are not available if you go to use the actual website portal that Matthew showed for downloading the data. So for example, you can find Sentinel-2 data with the lowest cloud cover for a given area and date range. You can't do that through the website, but you can do it through API. It will also remove Sentinel-2 split granules from search results. Again, you can't do that through the website. And there's some other very useful things, like if you do a data download through WPS, web processing services, it annoyingly renames the file, which if you're familiar with Sentinel-1 or 2 analysis-ready data, the file names contain a lot of information, like the date, the timestamp, the sensor, the tile name, if it's Sentinel-2, loads of really useful stuff. So you want to keep that. So what this does is there's a function to unzip it, rename the files to their original name, and then delete the zip file, so save space. And one other example is it creates XML files automatically to a set template for posting WPS requests, which do all kinds of things like clipping data, creating indices, doing downloads. And previously you had to do those a bit manually, so that's a huge benefit. So I could talk about that a lot more, but I'll just say that we've also got 4 Jupyter notebooks which demonstrate using various of these functions in this library for things like downloading data, converting files to optimize GeoTIFF so they run more efficiently in GIS, mosaicing imagery, clipping imagery, plotting NDVI, normalized difference vegetation index. So there's lots of different things and done in a very efficient way because they're using this library. Okay, I think that's all the examples I wanted to show. There's a lot more here, as you can see, so come back to this and have a look at your own leisure after the webinar. But I just wanted to point out at the bottom here, we've got links to GitHub accounts and web pages of relevant organizations, just put a few in as starters. So if I've missed you out, please add to this. You can do it through a pull request or email me. And also other useful Earth observation GitHub links. So there's the awesome EO code, which I mentioned earlier, which is well worth a look, and also an awesome SAR list, synthetic aperture radar. So that's well worth a look as well. If you've got any other suggestions we should add here, please let me know. And the final point is this is all shared under a Creative Commons attribution license. So I'll just show you what this means, that you can use or adapt the data for any purpose that includes commercial use, but we do ask, please acknowledge and give credit for the data that you're using. Okay. I'm just going to go back to this now to move on to talk about, well, just recap the best practice on code sharing in case I went through any of that too quickly. So the best way to contribute is via a pull request. If you're going to add code, please do it to the relevant section of the list, and we can create new subsections if necessary. Ensure code is well commented, like the examples that I showed, and provide a README file in your source repository which explains the context and purpose and acknowledges any funders or other contributors. And please do include ancillary files. So if you provide a Jupyter notebook and it needs an environment file, we can link to that as well. Obviously, make sure you've got permission to share code if you're not the sole author. As I mentioned, remove any personal data such as staff names or corporate data, so make the file paths generic. If you use code that you've downloaded from our list, please acknowledge its creators. And if you find any bugs in the code or want to suggest improvements, please do that in a very constructive and courteous way. Okay. Now we're going to move on to talk about the user forum that we've set up. And again, we asked people about their experience of using forums for support with processing Earth observation data. And there was actually the most widely used one was Stack Overflow, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, and I agree this is very useful, whereas all the other platforms that we asked about were more sort of evenly spread. But Stack Overflow is absolutely huge, and you can create tags to You could, for example, have a tag for S1, S2, ARD, but you need a huge number of reputation points in order to create a new tag. And I think we wanted to create something a bit more of a focused group, like an actual user community, rather than just quickly asking a question. I'm having a problem with my Python code, and then someone answers, and then you move on. We want to create a bit of a community feel. So we also asked people what features were important to them in a discussion group or a community forum. And search function, being able to assign tags to questions and being able to send private messages to other users were the things that came out on top. So we took the decision to set up a workspace on Slack, as we've mentioned, because this is widely used, especially within the government and public sector. There's quite a few good Slack groups already set up for sort of government geography, Defra digital, things like that, and these seem to be very popular. Also, there is a free plan available that gives us the functionality we need. It's very easy to set up and invite people to join. But the key point is it's also discoverable, so we can put a URL out there and people can just find it and join. Obviously, we're going to have a big promotion now to promote it to our target audience, but people can also just happen across it themselves, and we wanted that to be possible. It's flexible. You can use it in your browser or you can download an app. And it can make the conversations more focused because you can set up channels for particular topics. It does allow private messaging, which was one of the top things people wanted. And also the other thing people wanted was to be able to search, and the posts on this are archived and accessible, and you can set keywords and search by those. You can also use emojis and keywords as tags. I haven't tried the emojis yet, but apparently you can do that. And the user has control over their notification settings, which is something I will demonstrate in a minute. So this is how to find and join the Slack workspace. If you've got a Slack account already, you can join through the top one. If you don't have a Slack account, you can join Slack and then sign up using the URL at the bottom. And I've had a few people help me out with testing this, and this has all worked fine so far. I think the only issue is if you have a Slack account you haven't used in a while and you've forgotten your password, but everyone's managing so far to sign up and join. So I'm going to now quickly show you what that looks like. Oops. So you can, as I say, open it in your browser, which looks like this, or you can open it in the web app, which looks like that. Very similar, really. A note about the browser, it doesn't work in Internet Explorer 11. That is not supported, but I'm using it in Chrome. It works fine in that. I think it would work in Edge. So you can use it in a supported browser, or you can use it in the app. I'll show you the app again. One of the nice things about the app is if you're a member of other Slack workspaces, you can see them on the left of the screen here. You can have them all open and switch between them, so that could be quite handy. If not, you can just use it in the browser. It does all the same functionality. So I'm going to start by showing you the structure of this. It's split into channels for particular topics, and we've set up a few already. Each channel has a description saying what it can be used for. So we've got an applications channel for asking questions or sharing tips about the suitability of Sentinel-1 or 2 ARD for particular applications. So you might say, oh, I'm interested in using radar data for detecting upland burning. Is it suitable for that? Has anyone else tried this? What have you found? So it's that kind of discussion. Then we've got one for CEDAR, and we've got one for the EO data service. We've got one for cloud computing. So that could be it's about using Jasmine, as Ed has mentioned, or Azure, which is what the EO data service is built on. So that can obviously be a very efficient way of accessing the data. And then we've got one on resources, events and training, because that's obviously, I think, something that's going to be very interesting to a lot of people in this kind of user community. And then finally, we've got the general channel. And this, everyone who joins the group will be automatically put in the general channel, and then they can sign up for any others that they're interested in. And as I say, we can create new channels as we go along if they're needed. And similarly, if any channels are really not being used very much, then we can just get rid of them. You can pin posts at the top of channels, and we've got one in the general channel which outlines guidelines for use, which I won't go through right now because I'll do that on a slide in the presentation later on, but it's got guidelines for use, so everyone will read that when they join. And also just some data protection and security considerations, things that people might want to think about before using it. And it's got links to Slack's privacy policy and GDPR commitment as well. If you're very eagle-eyed, you might see that the words API is highlighted in this post. And the reason for that is that I've set API as a keyword that I'm interested in getting notifications about whenever anyone posts anything about it. You can do that by clicking on Preferences. And here you can choose what type of notifications you receive and when you receive them, because that's something I think is very important. We want this to be useful to people, and if you just get bombarded with constant emails, I think people will get fed up and just turn everything off. So set it to something that's going to be reasonable to you. So I've set it to only allow notifications on weekdays between 8 AM and 6 PM. It's not going to make a pinging sound, so it's not going to disturb me if I'm doing a conference call or something, and send email notifications with summaries once an hour. But I could have fewer notifications if I wanted. So set it to something that's reasonable and not going to disturb your day. And you can then put as many keywords as you want in here, and then you'll get notifications when people use them. So you could have things to do with events, like tell me when anyone talks about training. It could be technical terms, so tell me when anyone mentions Python, because that's what I'm interested in using. Or it could be about applications. I'm really interested in detecting peat using analysis-ready data, or in habitat mapping, or anything like that. So you can just add them all separated by a comma. Also on here, you can choose what you want to show displayed on the sidebar, at the side of the image. So things like all unread messages, all direct messages, and things like that. So I'll just show you how to send a message now. That's very easy. You can send a message in a particular channel. So you would just type in here, and you can use the @ sign to tag a particular person. I won't do that because I know everyone's names will pop up. Type your message. If you press enter, it will send the message. So press shift and enter if you want to create a new line. And then when you've typed something, you also get the green arrow, which you can use that to send your message as well. You also have the option of sending a direct message. If you just click on there, again, I won't actually demonstrate that because that will bring up the names and profiles of everyone in the group, but you can click on that and do that, and you can send a direct message to one person or to more than one person at the same time. And you can also, I haven't tested this yet, but apparently you can also call people through this as well. The final thing to point out is that you can type a search term in here. So I just type in API, and it will tell me where that term has come up in any messages or channels or files or people. And you can filter it to posts made by particular people or shared in particular channels or within a particular date range. Okay, so I think that's everything that I wanted to demonstrate on Slack. So just go back to finish off now. When you come to sign up, I have set it so that anyone with an email address from any of the domains below can join the group without needing an invitation. This is a list I put together very, very quickly, so please don't be offended if your organization isn't on here. Please just let me know and we will add you. I've sort of aimed at public sector organizations who we know are using analysis-ready data, and I'm sure I've missed people, so please let me know. Other people outside particular email domains can join by invitation. And once you're in the group, you can invite anyone else to join, not just from your own organisation and not just from people on this list, but from anywhere at all. So hopefully it will start to really take off soon. I mean, it's literally only just set it up this week. And I think there's something, I've seen some people have been joining as we've been doing the webinar, so thank you. But it's just a handful at the moment, fewer than 20. So people who've just been helping me to test it. A bit of important information about Slack. We're on the free plan, and that lets you make 10,000 posts and gives you 5 GB of file storage in one workspace. When we hit that 10,000 threshold, the oldest messages will be deleted as new messages are posted. So don't think of it as like an archive in perpetuity, although I do think it will take us a long time to get to 10,000. Also, we can provide staff resource until the end of December to really promote this, help people use it, and provide some light touch moderation. But we're hoping that after that, it will be largely self-maintaining by the community. Having said that, if we can show that this is having real benefit and people are making connections and, you know, using EO in their work because of it, we might be able to make the case for resourcing a paid for plan on Stack or providing more staff support if that's something that's even needed. So just to recap, on some of the best practice for using Slack. This is a platform for peer-to-peer communication and support. It's not for, if you've got a really specific query for, say, Defra or CEDAR or JNCC, please contact us directly. So this is more for asking things like, as I say, what is other people's experience of using Jupyter notebooks for such and such, you know, using analysis-ready data. As always, and I'm sure we all are, but please be constructive and courteous in all your messages. Make sure the messages are relevant to the topic of Sentinel-1 and 2 analysis-ready data. You'll be put into the general channel when you join, but please sign up for other ones that interest you. And then when you're posting, use the relevant channel and let us know if you want new channels set up, or I think all members can also set them up themselves. If you're asking for technical advice, do include all the necessary information. So it might be what software and what version you're using, or you include a snippet of code or anything about the data and how you've processed it. So that would be really helpful to, you know, get people, give you a useful reply. Be aware of data protection and security considerations and the relevant policies. So I've got the links to the Slack policies in the sort of welcome message for everyone. But obviously don't post anything that could be considered official. So don't post things with people's personal data in them. And as I've already said, set your user preferences to something that's manageable for you and not going to interrupt your day and not going to make you lose patience with this and just switch it off altogether. Set it to something where it will be at a useful level. And because we've got that limit of 10,000 posts and 5 GB storage space, please avoid recurrent posts. So for example, if you're promoting an event in 2 weeks' time, don't post about it every single day, just sort of post it once and maybe pin it to the top until the event's taken place. And where you can, if you want to have an attachment, provide a link to it somewhere else if you can, but you know, we can have still some attachments. So the next steps in this project, we are going to now promote both platforms more widely. At the moment, it's all just been happening behind the scenes this month. So we're now going to put it out there through all of our networks, encourage people to get involved and provide support where necessary. And we'll also be monitoring the use of both the GitHub through analytics and Slack as well. And so we can see stuff like the number of users, but we'd really like to hear from you as well as to whether it's making a difference to you. Are you learning something new? Have you used the code? So that's really what we need to do to measure impact. And this is so we can report to our funders at the Copernicus user uptake, but also it could help to make the case for future products, future projects or ongoing resourcing. So yeah, that would be really good. We would like you to help us by joining the Slack workspace. See, some people already have been. And then start discussions or contribute to any that may have been started. At the moment, I say it's a complete blank slate. Even if you're just saying hello and what you're working on at the moment or what you might be interested in using Sentinel-1 or 2 analysis-ready data for. tell us about any examples of code you know of that could go on the GitHub list. It doesn't have to be your own. You could say, oh, I know that this other organization is working on this and they've shared code publicly, and you could contact them. But obviously, yeah, please do share your own code through a pull request. And do help us promote both platforms to your colleagues and contacts. So you could do that when you join Slack. You can send invitations to other colleagues. And I know some organizations at the moment are recruiting new EO staff. So if you get new starters, this would be a nice thing to get them involved in so they can get a feel quite quickly for what's going on. And as I said, do tell us if you've benefited from either platform, because this will help us measure impact and report on that. So I just want to finish up by saying thank you, first of all, to everyone who took part in the user survey and helped inform our decisions. Thank you to Andrew Cutts at AC Geospatial, who's the author of that fantastic, awesome EO code list, but he also helped us set up the Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 ARD users GitHub list and write the documentation for it. So thank you to Andrew. To everyone who's contributed code so far, but especially to my colleagues, Costas Sideris and Becky Trippier at JNCC. Costas wrote those two Jupyter notebooks, demonstrating the things like downloading data, creating mosaics, creating indices. So some really good examples that people can look at. And Becky's done a lot of work behind the scenes to make her own code and other people's code available in a short space of time so that I could link to it and show it. And also Sam Franklin at CGI, who developed that fantastic Python library for the EO data service, which I know is going to be a brilliant resource for a lot of people. Thank you to our data and digital services team at JNCC for advice on setting up the forum and things like data protection considerations. And finally, thank you to Defra's Earth Observation Centre of Excellence and Scottish Remote Sensing Working Group to help us promote this webinar and promote these resources. And I hope I haven't missed anyone, but thank you to everyone who's helped us get this far. So thank you all very much for listening. And if you have any questions, you can, I know some have actually already come in through the chat panel. I can see those. And if you have any more as we go along, please continue to write them in there. And I will also hand back to Gwawa now to let us know if we've had any questions.
Thanks, Paula, and also thanks to the other speakers, Matthew and Ed today. That was a very, very informative session and lots to absorb. So thankfully this is being recorded and you can always come back, and all the resources will be shared by slides, as Paula mentioned. So there are a couple of questions. The first question I think you have answered, but I will ask again because I think it's an important one. With lots of us working at home for an extended time with no control over our IP address, is there an issue with EODS access? And this is a question from Matthew.
Hi Ulrich, thanks for asking that. So bands of whitelisting should pose no problem for the EODS application gateway. When changes are submitted with a ban to whitelist, it is kind of subject to a higher degree of scrutiny from security, but it has been done before. So while there is a preference previously for static addresses, you've quite rightly pointed out, we don't have that capacity to control our IP addresses nowadays. So maybe a new approach needs to be adopted. But if it is the case that a large swath of people can't access the Earth Observation Data Service, please contact us at gi-office@defra.gov.uk, because we are very anxious to get as many people on the service using it as possible.
Great, thank you, Matthew. So the next one isn't a question, it's more of some constructive advice, but I think it's something that's good for us to be aware of, especially if we can't find the links, etc. So I'll just read it out and I'll invite anybody to comment on it. So just about managed to find the repo by Google, and it turned up as a commit from one of the contributors. Suggests that the name/readme needs to be search engine optimized bit so that people Googling or wondering where to start can find it. This is on GitHub, by the way. Bits of an impossibility to find it right now from a straight Google due to the use of acronyms. And that is a common problem across government, our use of acronyms, which I think we all recognise. And then there's an addendum to this. So we can see that the README has a lot of links and should have made it appear in the search. I suspect that unfortunately it is the name of the repo that made it hard to find. Maybe over time it will rise up the rankings as people link to it. So if you're not present at this webinar and trying to Google your way to this, it might be quite difficult to find. Does anybody have anything to comment on that?
Yeah, I can reply. Well, thank you. That's a really helpful point, because obviously we've only just set it up, so I think that could be one reason why it's quite low, because it is brand new and hasn't been used. No one's been linking to it. We're going to do more to promote it now, so we'll put that link in various relevant places. But also, it's got me thinking, because we've actually got a member of staff at JNCC who is very experienced in search engine optimization, and it's going straight on my to-do list to talk to him and pick his brains on how we can improve this. So thank you for that. That's really helpful.
Great, thanks, Paula. So moving on to the next question. This question is for you, Ed. Is it possible to get more thumbnails / previews of images on the CEDAR website before attempting to download?
Okay, that's a great question. Yes, it is on my list of things to do. JNCC provides thumbnails when they provide their data for us to archive. Unfortunately, I can't download thumbnails from the Defra EO data service, but I will be looking at trying to create those and then ingesting them to the CEDAR archive to help users look at data before having to download data files.
Great, thanks, Ed. Is it worth mentioning the GeoStore here as well as a way to visualize some of the data? Is that possible through that?
Which do you mean by the GeoStore? You can definitely open them up using the BSI curl in QGIS without having to download them. If that's something that you can do,
Yeah.
that's definitely a way of doing it. So.
Great, thanks, Ed. So moving on to the next question. At CNPA, which I think is Cairngor's National Park Authority, we generally use consultants to carry out GIS Earth observation analytical work. How might me make use of GitHub? Can the consultants make an account, or does it have to be a staff member at CNPA?
Well, you need a GitHub account if you want to contribute to, for example, to our list or share your own code. But you don't need to access the code. And it is free to set up an account and very, very quick to do. So how we might make use of it was a question, I suppose. If you're wanting to use Sentinel-1 or Sentinel-2 and ancillary data in your GIS analytical work, and you've presumably got a specific function that you want to do, so you might want to download some Sentinel-2 for an area of interest, so through a geographic search, apply cloud masks and clip it to an area of interest or something. We've got examples on the repo of how to do this, so that's how you would use it. You would look at that, find those examples, and then adapt to them for your purpose.
Great, thanks, Paula. Just reading ahead, it appears that same question for the CEDAR archive. So is there any registration requirements to access data from the CEDAR archive? I have a question for Ed.
You don't actually have to register for the CEDAR archive for the ARD data. So this is all publicly open. So anybody can come in and just use the data. Other data sets you might have to register for, but yeah, for the ARD, it's free and open access. So.
Great, thank you. Next question, can you integrate the simple ARD service for Northern Ireland and Scotland in the same way? I'm not sure exactly what is meant by that question, but I'm assuming it means in relationship to the Earth Observation Data Service. So I guess
maybe that person could just follow up with a brief explanation. I think that
please.
it does remind me of something that I forgot to mention. I think we assume too much familiarity with this, but that the data processed by the Defra EO data service for England and that processed through the Simple ARD service for Northern Ireland and Scotland is all processed using the same method to exactly the same standards. So if you access it through CEDAR, you can get data which is completely, analytically comparable. So I don't think that's necessarily exactly what that user was asking, but that has helped to jog my memory to let people know about that, because that's a very important point, and I don't think I made it clear earlier on that the data and the metadata is really consistent.
Yes, and you can access it all through the CEDAR archive. So if you haven't got access to EODS, then you can get access to the data through the CEDAR archive, which you do not need an account for because it is publicly accessible data. And the same goes for the Simple ARD data, that all goes into the same place. I think it's it's a slight change in the metadata. So the metadata will have a line that tells you whether it has been processed from EODS or the Simple ARD service. And basically that's the difference at the moment. It might be worth mentioning Wales here. So at the moment, Wales data is not in the CEDAR archive, but we're hoping in the future that might change. And the reason for this is Wales have their own system for generating ARD. For Sentinel-2, again, it's using the same processes, or it's using the same software at least, so it should be comparable. Sentinel-1 is also created to backscatter level in Wales, but using a slightly different software. So there's still some work to do to be able to integrate those data sets to make it fully UK compatible in the CEDAR archive. Okay, moving on. Next question. Is it possible to actually run and demonstrate one of the Jupyter notebooks to would that take too long? So I'm assuming, is it possible to do that right now? Is that a question?
We have done this in a previous webinar, which I think Matthew might have linked to. So we have not done it like a whole one, because yes, it does take too long, and you've got to set up, and also for me to do it, I would need to be. This is coming back to the question about IP addresses. I can't do that because working from home, I can't access the EO data service and do that. But we do have a video of one already done. So for people with access to the EO data service, that is on there on a previous webinar. And I think what it might be a nice idea to do, so we're going to make these slides available on our website. We're going to make this webinar available. What we could do as a separate thing, perhaps do a little video of just one of them. So maybe one of Costas's ones that he's developed, just run through that as a little video on screen capture separately and put it there as another resource. But I mean, they are all there and should be well documented so that you can run them yourselves. But yeah, I think it would be nice to make a video available. It just wasn't really feasible within this, with all the swapping between presenters and swapping between websites, to then have to swap to a virtual machine as well. So sorry, we haven't done that here.
A nice idea, I think, to put videos, more video resources available on our website so that everybody can see, because people could follow that as well. It could be a bit of a tutorial. So I think that's a great idea. Thanks for that question. That encourages us to do more of that sort of stuff. So the next question I think we've answered, but I think I'll ask it anyway, because it'd be quite good to remind people what the difference between Jasmine and CEDAR is. So this is for you, Ed. For users in Scotland, what is the best way to access the ARD if we do not have access to Jasmine? So that's the question.
Okay, that's great. So the best way to access this data would be using the CEDAR archive. So like I said earlier, it's free and publicly available data. So yeah, you can use the data browser that I talked about in my talk to download the data, or you can use the BSI curl command that I explained in the talk as well, and that will pull data directly into GIS software without having to download.
Great, and to confirm that Jasmine is the compute facility and CEDAR is the archive where the data is stored.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Jasmine And then the CEDAR archive is technically on Jasmine, but anyone can access it. So.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Ed. Just a handful more questions to go. These are great questions, by the way, so thank you, everybody. Next question, get partners to link, oh no, sorry, next question. Do you think the Jupyter library developed for EODS would be easily transferable for use in CEDAR API? I think that's a question for you, Ed.
Yeah, so hopefully we will, like I said, be writing some code very soon. I will hopefully get it running, so it can be run on Jasmine, or it can be run outside Jasmine as well. So hopefully we'll have a very similar code that can work with the CEDAR archive, the same as the Earth Observation Data Service as well.
I think it would be exactly as Ed said. It's a case of preparing something from scratch, which is what we already had on our to-do list anyway, because the API endpoints, so EO Data Service is using GeoNode and GeoServer API endpoints, which are very specific to that structure. So I don't think it would be easily transferable to just adapt one for the other. It is something that Ed and colleagues at CEDAR are going to do specifically. Having said that, if you want to look at the Jupyter library that's been developed for EODS to see the type of functions that people find useful, yeah, that might be a helpful start.
Great, thank you both. And now this is the last question, and it's a question for you, Matthew. So as a consultant undertaking EO analysis for government agencies, should I register to use the EO data service and API using the gi/office@Defra email address?
Thanks for that. Thanks for asking, John. Yes, please, if you could apply for access using gi-office@defra.gov.uk, or use the Qualtrics link on the front page. So let me just put that link in there for you.
Great, thank you, Matthew. So that's all the questions that have come through today. So unless there are any more, I would again like to thank you all for attending this webinar today, and I'd like to thank the speakers all again once more. So thanks to Paula, Ed, and Matthew, and hopefully we'll get using all of this resource in earnest. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you all.